The Bell Hooks Award recognizes her achievement in quote-unquote dismantling intersectional systems of oppressions with the distinct goals of uplifting members of historically marginalized populations through her groundbreaking work that speaks to our moment in history and our hope for the future. So it's really a great achievement. Alexa has published 23 books on digital humanities, race, gender, cultural globalization, Shakespeare, disability, and film and theater. At MIT, she's the founding co-director of MIT Global Shakespeare's, an open access performance video archive. Through the Open Access Project, she has spotlighted artistic and academic works by people of color and enabled students, artists, and researchers to access primary research materials freely. So please join me in welcoming Professor Alexa Alice Joubin.
Thank you, Pinja, for inviting me. It is a great honor. It is late here in Washington, D.C., but I understand it is the beginning of your day in Taiwan and East Asia. Good morning and good evening. Generative AI is a key issue for the humanities because the emerging technology has compelled our society to think more deeply about what it means to be human, and such questions as mind and body, free will, moral agency, the nature of consciousness, and the relationship between humans and machines. Some of these questions are very classic philosophical and even theological questions, but now they've come into the public consciousness and debate about technologies. So AI, as a game changer, has introduced philosophical questions into the public realm, which is a good thing. So this is the scene late fall 2022, when ChatGPT was announced, right? People felt like this is a moment of where humans are playing God, creating a new creature. From there, a lot of people rushed to shake hands with the AI, right? But I've always said, follow the money. Why is there such a hype? Journalists hype this from November 2022 all the way to at least March 2023. However, they miss a point. If you ask the question about who benefits from this kind of hype and indiscriminate promotion of AI, you quickly realize those who have a stake in it, quite literally, right? Who has the most to gain, in what ways? Therefore, I've told myself not to be taken away by all the hype. There are many challenges for sure, but some are hyped, some are substantive. If we get carried away and distracted by challenges that are simply hyped, we will lose focus. So there are people who are more hesitant in this kind of handshake. Well, many scholarly associations, of course, they are not unambiguous. I will give you two examples where they actually ban it. And that is because indiscriminate uses of AI as shortcut is really problematic. There are many good use cases of this kind of AI, but taking a shortcut and in allowing it to become so-called author really is not the way to go forward. For example, the science journals. This is the editorial policy which came out in 2022. They specifically say that artificial intelligence tools cannot be authors. In the humanities, the National Endowment for the Humanities, they also have a very clear policy on use of AI, and this is specifically for reviewers. They say AI-generated tools rely upon the submission of substantial information. As you know, the prompts, if they're very short, you don't get very useful results. So you have to lay out the parameters, you have to say a lot of things. You have to submit the whole grant applications, for example. And the problem is it's a black box technology. So the users are not able to control where the information will be sent, saved, viewed, or used. But these pictures are ultimately problematic. The metaphor of humans versus machines conceals more urgent issues of social justice. It makes the human labor invisible. It doesn't quite work like this, does it? You know, the hyped threats, they always say in the hype culture. And so, my God, machine, it's the same like the movie Terminator, machine's gonna take over the world. This is the reality. You think you're shaking hand with ChatGPT, you're actually shaking hand with the whole society. We're not shaking hands with machines, but rather with our collective selves. Or rather, humans versus cat. I've always suspected it's a case of, many cats or monkeys punching on a keyboard, accidentally typing out the complete words of Shakespeare. This image gives us a more nuanced picture of what ChatGPT is. It is not humans versus machines, but rather humans and humans in collaboration. Data sets are human in origin, and the prompts and the questions are actually data points as well. As we face the new challenges, the first thing we need to do is to assess the disruption and realize that the real crisis is not the emergence of generative AI itself, but rather the fact that we lack critical AI literacy. I believe we urgently need to teach students AI literacy and to incorporate it into our instruction instead of pretending that it does not affect us or that it is not there. And of course, with this kind of risk-benefit assessment, we understand that we always need to use tools appropriately and always need to find the correct tool for the job. In other words, don't ask Michael Jordan to play football. We'll take a very quick look, first of all, at Google versus ChatGPT. Both of them have very similar interfaces, and if you think about them, they kind of give you have a question, right? You want to find answers. They give you some kind of answers, organized differently. So first of all, if we take a look at Google, you type in, for example, what is the difference between race and gender? You get a list of results. Those are actually websites, and you can decide on which one to click. It is ranked hierarchically, however, right? So there's algorithm, there's marketing, depending on how much you pay. There's search engine optimization going on behind the scene. So it is not discursive. It doesn't talk like a human. On the other hand, for ChatGPT, if you were to type in your question, when you're Googling something, you tend to focus on keywords only. Here, you will be very discursive in kind of writing it all out as if you're talking to a human. So for example, I would say, what are the key differences between race and gender? Question mark. How are race and gender constructed? Do racism and sexism share some similarities? So rather complex. And ChatGPT will draw on the data sets it has trained on and find and present answers to you in the style of a conversation. It can look like an essay, for example, right? So that's the key difference. And ChatGPT up to 3.5 is not connected to the internet. With ChatGPT 4, as well as the new forms of applications, people can now embed it inside other apps, and you can, for example, plug it into Chrome, the browser, and you're able to use it as an assistant to search the internet. But generally, the earlier iterations of ChatGPT is not capable of searching the internet like Google can. What's notable is that these two tools have different design goals. Google is an indexing portal. It wants to send you in the right direction. It is not a content provider itself. It is like a table of contents of a book, right? And it's full of algorithm biases in ranking the search results. Generative AI, on the other hand, is a content aggregator with limitations. It wants you to stay. It wants to entice users to linger. The longer, the better, and to chat with it. So people call it a chatbot. So it's a self-contained remixing machine. My view on it is that Google is a catalog. Google is a catalog of what you can find on the shelves in a supermarket. Generative AI is, you've done the shopping already, you have the ingredients. It's actually a mixer, like the mixer in your kitchen. You throw apples and oranges and banana in there, you mix, voila, you have juice. And so we know that ChatGPT is based on what is called a large language model. It's actually a statistical tool. What it does is that it cannot process natural language, as confirmed by linguist Noam Chomsky. It doesn't understand anything about natural language processing. It understands statistics though. So it assigns statistical weight to each word in a data set. And based on such calculations, it will be able to complete sentences. So think of it as a superpowered autocomplete. For example, if you were to say, not all heroes wear blank. Not all heroes wear capes. There's 80% probability because most people say that. You can say pants, of course, it's less likely, right? And after the word cape, what happens? Not all hero wears capes, but. So statistically, what's most likely to follow that is the word but, because otherwise, why else would you say not all heroes wear capes? It appears that you're setting up some contrast in your sentence. So ChatGPT would put but there, and it'll continue this process endlessly with very quick calculation. For us humans, we think we're asking an infinite variety of questions. This question is different, but the AI finds it really boring because all these questions are the same. You're basically asking, what are the most likely words to follow what I just said? I mentioned earlier that we need to carry out a risk-benefit assessment. This type of AI can cause linguistic injustice because it promotes an uncritical normative reproduction of standard English that aligns with power structures. And society as a whole may not value writing as individualistic expression when machines mimic human speech. Further, in general, I would say there's a real risk to predictive text, even if it's convenient. This kind of algorithm typically found on your phones or even on your computer, it tries to predict what your next word might be and suggest it so that you can simply tap it instead of having to type it out. If you start a sentence, I am, are you, well, it could be the algorithm is going to guess that you're going to say, most likely, I'm running late, rather than saying, I'm running around the block. Similarly, if you type, we couldn't have done it without, well, the most likely word might be without you, or without your kindness, though that's more complex. And so, as you can see, what predictive text is doing is to give a small range of choices and to narrow down the choices. So generative AI, at its core, it's a form of autocomplete on steroids. The risk of predictive text is that over time, we may find ourselves only be able to, or only habitually think one of three thoughts deemed probable by the machine. And a form of intellectual laziness may begin to develop, and that may lead to erosion of imagination. Now, there are a lot of social biases. Even evidence-based arguments generated by this kind of AI, therefore, can contain biases. And therefore, some of the significant substantive rather than hype challenges are that it's becoming difficult to sort through conflicting information. There are a lot of hyped responses singing the praises, but also there are doomsday predictions about the AI. And all of these voices, they invariably amplify pre-existing social biases and prejudices, imaginations about human relations to machines. But the AI itself could amplify pre-existing biases as well. moving forward, of course, it's becoming more difficult, especially for students, to distinguish synthesis from critical thinking. People may mistake synthesis for a form of critical thinking. Of course, that is a challenge that existed already before the AI arrived on the scene. But right now, I suppose that the challenge is being amplified.
These flaws notwithstanding, AI has been quite useful for some artists. We can put AI to good use as long as we recognize that it is an aesthetic instrument. It is a mixer, remixer, and it is not an instrument of reason. Some artists have already used AI similar to ChatGPT as aesthetic instruments. An example is Annie Dorson's what she calls algorithmic theater. Among the many works she created was one in 2013 called A Piece of Work. It's a machine-made Hamlet for a post-humanist age. There was a sole human actor on stage who's responding to and intruding into machine-generated generated text. To put it more precisely, it's actually algorithms that take Shakespeare's text and randomize it. So it's a remixer, and the human-machine interaction became the contents of the theatrical piece. There are also Mark America and David Johnston, who have created poetry with algorithms. In Mark America's case, he remixes fragments of AI-generated text with its own words in order to, as it calls it, defamiliarize language for aesthetic effect and to increase its work to glitch potential, a practice which compares to the common JAG practice of intuitively missing a note to switch up the way an ensuing set of phrases get rendered. And I want to point out that the key word here is glitch, right? AI as a mixer adds glitch to otherwise smooth processes of thought. David Johnston similarly creates new works with AI language model. He's an avant-garde writer, and he does this through a series of carefully orchestrated prompts. He believes in a continuum between traditional conceptions of the human author as a conduit through which the wind speaks. And AI, he sees AI as an oracular vessel that is similar to the perforated fiber optic networks. By collaborating with generative AI, Johnston wishes to make words live again, as if reborn from a modularized system of language interchange.
We would need to enhance our metacognition, to be more aware of decision-making processes, to be aware of why we think in a particular way. And we will have an opportunity to rethink, for example, the craft of writing. And we'll get to rethink our educational goals. What exactly are we trying to achieve in our classrooms? The AI would also compel us to improve our curatorial and editorial skills. These are higher level skills under Bloom's taxonomy that goes beyond memorization and organization of facts. And last but not least, the emergence of generative AI is making discussions of machine ethics more popular and more accessible. I would also like to mention critical questioning skills as one of the benefits introduced by this AI. So I've always said that questions are data points. So it's very important to be able to ask effective questions. This is as important as solving problems. Hannah Arendt has this wonderful quote that I put on my slide here. To cease to ask unanswerable questions would be to lose the capacity to ask all the answerable questions upon which every civilization is founded. Now, we do live in an inquiry-driven culture. Algorithms have been with us for a long time, even before the arrival of generative AI. So it is critical that we teach students to be able to ask effective research questions, to find out where the questions may lie before claiming to be a problem solver. And of course, critical questioning skills are essential. In today's society, students will need to be able to ask effective questions while interviewing to select the right job. They need to be able to ask questions in order to identify opportunities for innovation when starting a business, when working with a team. And to learn new skills, you actually need to start with questions. Questions help us adapt to a changing world. So for all these reasons, in my risk-benefit assessment, I come to the conclusion that it is counterproductive to try to ban AI in higher education because AI permeates our life, and actually critical AI literacy is one of the most important skills for students to move forward. AI detectors that are available today are generally faulty, and they can lead to alienation of students, mistrust between student and faculty, and there are a lot of human biases that go into the process of identifying, saying you're suspicious of a particular student of having cheated. It is actually more useful to foster critical AI literacy. So I have been using AI even before the arrival of generative AI in my classroom when I teach Shakespeare, critical theory, and other literature classes. Here's a news story about how I do that. The link is on the screen. In general, I have a number of curriculum design principles. Number one is teaching with technologies rather than against technologies, as well as teaching histories of technologies. I firmly believe that books and pens are technologies too. And we just need to have metacognition skills in order to identify their histories, our particular relations with them. There are imaginaries associated with each type of technologies. And this kind of understanding has to do with inclusiveness, access, and equity, right? There are often a lot of unexamined, able-bodied assumptions when it comes to acceptance or rejection of technologies. We need to create multimodal channels for knowledge creation and dissemination in order to empower students and to include as many students as possible. So you can see some of the top objectives in my courses are the ability to form effective research questions, and the ability to then come up with well-rounded answers to those questions. And that is what I meant by critical thinking and writing skills. I start out with a place where I accept that students are using AI, whether I ban it or not. And so I talk to them very early on, and we have conversations often, completely open. And even experimenting tasks together. Do you think for this particular task, AI is helpful for you? Or is it simply wasting your time? Because then you need more time to curate and edit results. I never assume that the use of AI equals cheating. I would have international students for whom English is not their first language, right? So AI is a very useful heuristic tool in those cases. I have students who are dyslexic, meaning that they are less able to, in some cases, they can't even confidently type their own name correctly. So voice-to-text AI is a lifesaver. I learned early on what students think. Is that what I think doesn't matter. It's really what the clientele are thinking that matters, and I would adapt my pedagogies to them. And really what I'm emphasizing is the spirit of experimentation. What I successfully deployed in spring semester, I'm sure will be outdated already. Fall semester is about to start in September. I will have new tricks. So just keep evolving and keep thinking about use cases for chatbots. The image in front of you here captures one of the problems, isn't it? As soon as you think of this particular tool as a shortcut, you've already lost. Rather, you should think of it as a heuristic device. This particular student is sitting on a branch, right? And she's trying to saw off the branch, forgetting that she's actually sitting on it. Very often, we see students bring the wrong tools for the job, trying to deploy AI to write an entire essay, for example, rather than say, help me refine this research question. That is the foundation of my essay, for example. That would be a good use case. So to sum up, we understand that ChatGPT is a lumbering statistical machine for pattern matching and for extrapolating the most likely conversational responses to a question. Remember, the keywords are the most conventional responses. So it's at the core, not very creative. And as a probabilistic model, it really operates as a black box device. By that, we mean that the human coders, the designers themselves are unable to fully explain or predict the AI's output. They're not able to tell you why it gives this particular output this particular time. Based on that, I've argued in my research that ChatGPT is three things. First, it's a performance machine. It's an aesthetic instrument, meaning that if you play jazz, you might be able to appreciate this, right? Jazz relies on accidental, randomized, or intentional skipping of a note here or there in order to create new rhythm. What ChatGPT can help is to randomize the, to give you new thoughts about words and their combination, perhaps in ways you haven't thought of before. So it's an aesthetic instrument. It is not an instrument of reason. It is not an epistemological tool. All it does is put on an impromptu performance based on your prompt. It's very much a piece of theater. It is also a simulacrum machine because it simulates human speeches in order to give the impression of creating new realities. And last but not least, it's a social collaboration tool that illuminates previously hidden concordances between humans. So it is a ghost of public voices. I say ghost because it's not a crisp image. It's what we have collectively said. And if you understand its origin in humanity, you will stop pitching this human versus machine dichotomy, which is not nuanced and it's not very useful. Because once it's machine, many other things can happen in a capitalist society. Then simply blame the machine if something goes wrong, right? And there's also technological solutionism. We now have a crisis caused by machine. Let's build another machine to solve it. Technological solutionism is kind of a simplified way of thinking, in thinking that you can find binary solutions to every problem. You can distill and simplify every problem into a technical problem. Hence, AI detector to the rescue, except they don't really work, do they? But if you understand as a social collaboration tool, immediately the humans come into the picture. You understand, for example, in early days, those of you who've been following, you probably remember news stories about lowly paid laborers in Nigeria actually helping to train ChatGPT, right? Even if it's a machine, it's a human imprint everywhere. And in fact, the material trained on to begin with, they were generated by humans. So if you think of this way, it becomes a concordance between previously unseen linkage among human creations. In King Lear, there's actually a wonderful line that I thought is really apt. So King Lear, he's famously or infamously mad because he's mistreated by his daughters. And he walks around and he says, who is it that can tell me who I am? And he has a jester, the fool, who walks up and says, Lear's shadow. It means many different things in Shakespeare, but I thought the word shadow is fascinating. Shadow means a clown or an actor in Renaissance English. But in modern English, it also, of course, literally means your shadow, right? If you have light behind you. So the ChatGPT really is the public shadow. It tells us who we are based on what we have said collectively. And so, but that shadow is pixelated. So if you look at the second bullet point here, ChatGPT generates pixelated shadow images of the publics. And it's an echo machine. It's a machine that produces echoes of what the general consensus seems to be in this era. If you look at this particular slide, you understand that the so-called truth generated by this machine is very relative because of time-bound groupthink. If you take ChatGPT to pre-500 BC era, it will insist that the Earth is flat, because that was the most statistically likely answer given the data set of that particular time era. And so it doesn't know the truth, and of course it's incapable of lying. All it does, remember, it is like a mirror. So the other way to think about it is that it's a survey instrument. It collects the mean of opinions, right, mathematically, not truth. So it's mathematical average of what the humanity has produced textually. If most people say the Earth is flat, then it says the Earth is flat. That's all it does. And there are, the link is coming to you, this particular one. There was a MIT student, Rona Wang, who did an experiment with Playground AI. She asked the AI to edit her photo into a professional headshot. And you can see how the AI reflects the racist assumptions of the United States today. It thinks that only someone with white features will look professional. Basically, the AI is whitewashing the Asian American student. Another example, of course, we know that it's all about time-bound groupthink. It's about censorship. China's Baidu has produced an app called Ernie, and this Ernie supposedly performs well when the prompt is in Chinese. If you pitch Ernie and ChatGPT side by side. However, it refuses to answer a couple of questions, including June 4th, 1989, Russian invasion of Ukraine, zero COVID policy, as well as anything related to Taiwan. So that's simply another example of how the truth is relative. I think we have a deep understanding now of how ChatGPT really is a mirror held up to the humanity in a particular place, in a particular time. Right? There's nothing universal, and there's no God in it. As Hamlet says, hold as toward the mirror after nature, to show virtue her feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time is form and pressure. That's exactly what ChatGPT does again and again. Now, what does a pixelated shadow or image mean? ChatGPT remixes and regurgitates the texts that it knows. And so you can see in Daniel Rosen's installation artwork here, when someone passes in front of this particular mirror made up of many small mirrors, it produces a pixelated image of the person in front. It is not an exact reflection, but it's interesting enough. Apparently, to do this textually, it has impressed the public so much that there are bifurcated reactions to it. If we look at this particular image, you can see how it really illustrates visually how ChatGPT works and what it is doing every single time, right? And so to sum up, once we understand that, we understand it's not really about the machine. Would you fear the mirror, or would you rather spend time critiquing the image in the mirror? If it's a social collaboration tool, ChatGPT is not an all-knowing machine. When using it, we're not talking to machines, but rather we're talking to our collective selves. And as such, this technology is changing our relationships to ourselves. It's changing the public's relationships to themselves, right? And we can do a number of things. We can acknowledge we live in an inquiry-driven society. We can adapt to it. I say inquiry-driven because even before the emergence of ChatGPT, it's much less in the public discourse, but it is a fact. If you ever used Google Maps, if you ever used any search, any search engine, you've participated in inquiry-driven society. For me, I think it's more important to teach students to ask effective questions, research questions, than to ask them to write essays just for the sake of writing essays. And living in an inquiry-driven society means that we have to embrace ambiguity in an AI-mediated world. We need to learn to work with opaque situations. I don't actually care as much about the origin of a text. Is it machine generated or is it human generated? In my view, right, the machine cannot generate text. The machine is remixing human text. So ultimately, all of these are human in origin. I care more about quality. Is it engaging, right? Does it really have something to say? So that's what I focus on. And I guide students toward intentioned interactions with AI. I provide them with explicit rules of the game, but we do remain kind of open-minded for experimentation. We also drive home the point that AI really is socially bounded within the context of this use. It's a form of social collaboration. It's never about human and $1 million machine owned by corporations such as OpenAI, right? There are a lot of lawsuits going on, if we recall. Artists getting images because OpenAI did not properly pay for the images before using them as training material to train their algorithms. And to put it quite simply, that's akin to stealing. You are making smoothie, but you didn't pay for the fruits that you put in. That's basically what is happening. So Jaron Lanier has these wonderful things to say, which is the last point on my slide here. Seeing AI as a form of social collaboration is actionable. It gives us access to the engine room, which is made of people. Once we shift the focus to people, right, we begin to kind of move away from the myth and the hyped kind of fiction of human versus machine and realize it's actually humans versus human and humans for human. And those who are hyping this AI, very often they have corporate interest in mind. And to sum up, we shouldn't mythologize the AI because when you mythologize something, you take responsibilities away from those who are truly responsible. And we shouldn't pretend AI has no impact on our industry, or doesn't have impact here or there because I'm a poet. AI can't really write good poetry. That's actually beside the point. We need to think seriously about how to work with this technology and think more substantively about what it can and cannot do and how it's redefining originality and authorship. So what do we do in the classroom? Here are a number of possibilities. So the first one regards how to ask an effective question. I teach my students how to turn close-ended questions into open-ended ones. You can also use it as a buddy to play tennis with. Imagine you're playing tennis by yourself, right? Against the wall to practice tennis. Sure, it's great. It's helpful for skill development, but nothing beats having an actual buddy, right? To do back and forth, and ChatGPT can be that person. So can help you generate counter arguments. It can also serve as a reading buddy. Students often face very dense text and they're not confident with. So they can test their understanding against ChatGPTs. They can feed the text in there and ask it to generate an outline and compare that against their own. We also come up with kind of sophisticated prompts to make the AI generate essays. And then in class, we peer review the essays together. This is the fourth bullet point on my slide, and it's particularly useful for anyone who's appreciate student psychology. Peer review is a popular activity in class. We swap papers, we read each other's papers, and we're supposed to give feedback and critique. What happens there? Nobody really wants to say anything negative about their friend's essay, do they? Nobody dares. And so it becomes a futile exercise. You don't really get any feedback that is useful. And you just get polite praises or inconsequential feedback. But when they realize the essay in question is not generated by one of the classmates, it's not generated even by human, it's by a machine. It's perfect. AI is my lab animal. So it's a humanities lab. And when we peer review it, it's much more effective. The theaters will come out. Students will begin to take it apart, and they improve their critical thinking and writing skills much better because they know it's a machine. And that is what the machine is for, not to replace human, but to be there to aid in our experimentation and growth, right? Like a crutch, it serves many other purposes. There are many other assignments. It depends on how much time we have and how much interest you have during the Q&A. We can go over them. So this is just a quick snapshot. The first one, the link is coming to you. This is all of these tools I'm sharing. They are free, completely free. You don't even have to register for most of them. So this one, please only give it a try. Save it. Give it a try after today's session so that you can follow along here and not get lost. So basically, I ask students to use this particular tool about questions to help them brainstorm and write better questions. They type in a question here and click the big button, generate open-ended questions. So their question may not be very good to begin with. For example, is Othello a racist play? This is a bit of a yes, no, maybe question. Not as interesting, isn't it? So the bot is coded specifically to do one task, is to come up with alternative questions. Says the following versions of this question may elicit more conversation. So that's interesting. Instead of is Othello a racist play, how about you think about what themes does Othello explore? How does Othello's characterization reflect social attitudes toward race? So immediately you have more in-depth and open-endedness to the question. It's no longer a yes/no question. So that's what this tool does, and it's incredible. You can practice it again and again, even when your teacher is not there. It's available 24 hours. And to me, that's a machine job. It's not about outsourcing, but rather about accounting for learner psychology. Sometimes people are shy and introverted in class. Sometimes it's a face issue. They feel they ask a question that is stupid. Fermat.ws is another tool. And this tool helps you brainstorm possible arguments and counter arguments. You start with an argument. It'll give you three pros and 3 cons, which is rather interesting. It looks like this. So for example, you write Shakespeare's Othello. So you start with some kind of statement. Imagine you're on debate team, right? Shakespeare's Othello is a racist play. It depicts a black man in unfavorable light. Now, it could generate, you see in green, the so-called pro argument, kind of arguments that support the statement above. In red, it generates con arguments, arguments that the counter arguments to the statement above. So for beginning students in critical theory, for example, it's a very important feature. It's not really in depth, but it's more a conversation starter. It gets people thinking, and when we use it collectively live, it really is a tool. It's not about who is better, or AI is a teacher, it doesn't know things. Remember, it's all about statistical likely combination of words, and yet it could be put to some use if you design activities around it. This is an AI-enhanced search engine, so think Google with AI level of analytical ability. It is also a chatbot, but with up-to-date search results. What it gives you is not just a passage, it's not just passage after passage of lectures, but actually summaries of what it found with footnotes. So it includes links to sources in its answers, and that's an invaluable feature. So it gives you answers that look very much like ChatGPT output, but it has a lot of footnotes, and you can click on each to go to the sources. So it's kind of a combination of just the index in Google and a discursive bot. The next one is an AI assistant called Claude. The link is coming to you. This is by a company, Anthropic. It's actually funded by the outcasts of OpenAI employees. They're former employees. Some of them were fired. Some of them left the company. They founded this company called Anthropic, and they came up with Claude. So Claude can read PDF files. You can upload PDF to it. It can summarize the article. It can search within it, can help you with collaborative writing, and it appears to be easier to converse with. There are less harmful outputs, and you can steer it in particular directions. You can ask it to summarize the particular article. For foreign language learning, it's called TangentGT. So you can practice language skills in a fun and interactive environment. It's mostly text chat, but it does voice as well, so it can improve pronunciation. You can see in my screenshot here, you have these languages to choose from English to German and French, Russian. You choose your language, you choose your level, and you pick a scenario, such as making an appointment, for example, or going to an interview. And you can chat with it. What's interesting is different from ChatGPT because it's tailored to teach language, right, for language learners. So it's able to adjust the complexity of the conversation based on your linguistic level. And this evolved really quickly. I'm sure next time, if we meet again, even if only in a few months, things would have evolved, and I would have had a new set of tools.
As we have seen, AI can be a heuristic tool if framed and deployed appropriately. Here are a number of resources. So first of all, the Modern Language Association, MLA, they have now offered a new section on how to cite generative AI in MLA style in research papers. And the link is on the screen here. They have also collaborated with other organizations, and there's a webpage dedicated to this on writing and AI. There's a quick start guide with a number of useful links, and the resource page URL is here on the screen. I want to conclude this portion on AI as heuristic tools to look at the Bloom's taxonomy. On the screen here, you can see what Benjamin Bloom created in 1956, a classification of learning objectives. And typically, I would say, before the emergence of AI, people tend to think of education as achieving the first three goals. You would recognize and memorize some facts, and would understand the correlation among those facts, and you eventually be able to apply the facts and theory that you've studied to new concepts. So kind of memorization and application. With the AI among us, students today would need more cognitive skills. If you look at the green tier analysis, you would have to discern the quality and sources of information to distinguish mis- or disinformation from valid information. And so that part would take up a good deal of our attention and energy. And of course, to evaluate information and the coherence of ideas is also very important. And we would collectively work toward the eventual goal of curatorial skills, basically combinatorial thinking that combines one or two ideas, and to be able to curate and edit your own outputs and to reflect on your own ideas. Why do you think in this particular way?
So I think it's time for me to say something about policy. I call it from AI to AI, from artificial intelligence to academic integrity. Rule number one, do not pass off AI-generated contents as your own. So where I draw the line is not about the use of AI, but about transparency, full disclosure. You have to disclose it. In my mind, I always say, in engineering, in science, in terms of the papers that they do produce, full disclosure is always important. Otherwise, other scientists will not be able to reproduce the result of the experiment, right? The specific equipment you use now. So why would the same not be true for the humanities? For a violinist, the particular violin they're playing on can sometimes have significance, right? So here, did you use ChatGPT 3.5? Did you use ChatGPT 4 or Claude? It's significant. What was the prompt you put in? So all of these are data points. It's not just the result itself. That's what I wanted to promote, transparency. And so you can't use AI to help you complete assignment without proper attribution. It's all about attribution and full transparency. And it's not just a matter of pointing out the equipment, such as the version of the AI you use, but rather sharing your prompt as well. So in a scientific spirit that is meaningful and important, it's not just about ethics, but it's actually about intellectual integrity in terms of giving the full picture of your collaboration your use of this tool, so that other people can think more deeply about the research that you have done and build upon it. It is now time for some light-hearted conclusion. Let us have some ChatGPT, genuine pure tea, that is. This vendor in Hyderabad, India, claims that their tea is even enhanced by AI, by herbs, that is. You can see the sign in English and Telugu, which says it is grandma's recipe.
Okay, thank you, Alexa, for this illuminating and inspiring talk. EALA arranged this exam because many of us in the profession feel, certain kind of anxiety about this latest development of generated AI. Actually, ChatGPT just showed up last November, right? And already it has huge impact on us. In fact, I think the fear about AI is all around us. I went to see the latest episode of Mission Impossible with my son last night, in which the invisible entity or the owning, this all-knowing AI algorithm is the main villain. But your talk today helped us to understand that the generated AI better and how we can use it. And how we as professional English teachers and researchers can use different AI applications to help us to teach and even to do research maybe in the future. Thanks again. So now the floor is open for questions. Please identify yourself when you pose a question. Thanks.
I have a question.
Hi, yes.
Yeah, my name is Marshall. I teach at the University of Houston. Professor Melody Lee told me about this meeting and I really picked up a lot. So thank you. This is kind of a comment, really. So if we just say ChatGPT, it uses the word chat. But from my experience, really there's not any great software that can seamlessly get voice to text. So basically you need to type an answer. So I think the term chat is not really correct. But at the same time, what does impress me, let's just say ChatGPT, is when it spits out the answers, even though the answers may not always be good, the English is flawless. And I've tried it in Chinese and the Chinese seems pretty good too. So that really shows me that, yeah, this is something that could be useful, but then for a lot of things. But then when you get to the question of students using it, so if you have, like this semester, I will have 3 classes taught in English with a total of 90 students. So if they're all writing, then I find, if there is a tool like Turnitin that seems to have AI in it, that's useful, because otherwise in 90 essays in a limited amount of time, it's hard to sort through and make those kind of judgments. So but I'm really wondering about the voice into the machine. And the chat bot understanding a human voice as opposed to just typing in an answer.
So that's an entirely different area. I've among the pre-AI, not pre-AI, AI has been with us since the 80s, actually. The pre-ChatGPT era, there's a project at MIT, it's called Global Shakespeare. It's an open access performance video archive. One of our ambitions about 7 years ago was to do voice recognition so that when we upload a video in a foreign language, you're able to automatically subtitle it and eventually provide English translations. But we since learned from MIT experts in that area, voice recognition is actually extremely difficult. As you can see from all the current application, from Siri to Amazon Alexa, the most frequent response is, sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. This accent, this emotion, this modulation in human voices, even if it's the same person's voice. So voice recognition, of course, will be brave new world, but I think we're quite far away from that, especially in theater production.
Yeah, I definitely get this, and the reason is because, like, if I dictate on my phone a lot because I can't see the keyboard and I can't type with one hand. But what is a stark difference between, say, Siri and ChatGPT? ChatGPT will not spit out incorrect sentences. And with Siri or the Apple dictation, a lot of times it just looks like it's guessing and it spits out these really awful things that no human would ever say. So I feel like they're really far behind, at least in the statistical prediction of what the next word would be. Apple is far behind.
All right, so questions in the chat box here on Zoom. From Tran Hao, how would you handle a case concerning students' academic dishonesty? And this resonates with, I think, Charles' question of teaching a class of 90 students and there's really no way to filter things out, would you give them a second chance to make up, or would you go ahead and report them to the academic honesty board instead? No to number two, because I suppose in the US is as cumbersome as it is in Taiwan in terms of raising and academic integrity case. What I focus on really is the quality. There's also a lot of debate and our human unconscious bias in terms of why do you suspect a particular student? This race, gender, sexuality, class, this particular kind of student, you don't look the part, you must be cheating. So it's very dicey ground. And as I said, those AI detectors, they don't really work. So what evidence do you have then if it's not plagiarism? If you suspect machine generated text, plagiarism is easier. You can say, there's this text and your essay copies from it. But in terms of AI, it's far more complex. So it's a moot point. To go forward, you need evidence. And if your evidence is based on this AI detector, very often it's heavily contested. So I focus on quality, and the student will receive low grade. Yes, we can have a private conversation depending on the case. Maybe they get a second chance to kind of work more on it, knowing what the problems are. And I find that kind of conversations generally are more productive, rather than saying, I've caught you, and evidence is, I feel you're cheating. Next question from Melody Lee. Who says that AI is better at technical writing? What do you think about using AI tool for reference to write something like recommendation letter? What guidelines should we give ourselves as educators for using AI? I would say recommendation letter is not a good use case. However, administrative memo is administrative memo. For those of you who are in administration and need to write a lot of memos or kind of very formulaic writing, I would say AI could perhaps be useful, but still need a lot of human curation. But if used correctly, could start to save some time.
Huang Boyuan. Okay, yeah. Huang Boyuan is asking, Huang Boyuan from National Jiayi University is asking something regarding AI hallucinating.
Yes, AI hallucination. Is it possible, Professor Huang asked, that we can teach students to detect and think more critically about the false or unjustified responses provided by generative AI? If that's possible, how do we do it? And is there an effective way? Thank you. Excellent question. I designed a number of activities to address this. The first one is up here in front of you. We peer review the text that are generated by AI. We learn two skills. One is in prompt engineering, how to engineer your prompts to have just enough detail and precision in order to generate a more useful output. And skill number two is very much related to Professor Huang's concern here, quality analysis. The text is not generated by a real person, and so it's conducive to critical analysis, particularly in peer reviewing critical writing. So, for example, we're going to critique an AI-generated passage. I put in the prompt here regarding our reading that day from Judith Butler. And we ask for, say, a 250-word output about what gender is. ChatGPT swiftly gives us an answer, but you can see all the flaws in there. So what is relevant here to Professor Huang's question is not just the hallucination, but rather subpar responses. How to detect that, and how to improve upon it? Well, here, The bot goes, gender is an abstract concept that has been debated for centuries. It is a social construct that is constantly evolving and has different meanings and implications for different people. Amazing, isn't it? But it said exactly nothing. All these are empty, generalized statements. That's very useful to me to teach against this. If I use student example, there's face issue, and perhaps they will feel that they're being singled out. That's generated by a machine. We don't have to be shy about criticizing it, and it's a perfect example demonstrating what does it mean to have an empty statement. It's so generalized, it's trying to cover everything, all the ground, but it's saying exactly nothing. The next exercise, we can critique stereotypes together. So we can catalog stereotypes and implicit biases in the output. So students play an active role in decoding messages in the media. And AI is useful here because it is, as I said before, it synthesizes existing text using their unspoken assumptions. And so it's a good place to look for concrete evidence of social biases. You can't just randomly collect, say, a piece of news story and say there's bias. If you can use ChatGPT as a survey instrument, it can become useful. Last but not least is the Socratic method exercise. So if you look at my slide here, basically ChatGPT is an interlocutor. This is an instance of ChatGPT as a tennis buddy. You can play tennis against the practice wall. That is more what a traditional college essay does. There's a student, there's the wall, you play tennis against it, the teacher gives you a grade. The Socratic assignment, however, the student's playing tennis against an AI body. The AI body is not judgmental, so that's a good thing. And that's where it comes in. You can practice this role of interlocutor in repeated conversations as an initiator of topics rather than simply a passive recipient of knowledge of what the instructor tells you. So the activity involves ask with prompts, you initiate a series of chain of thought prompts and generate outputs, and you ask follow-up questions. You collect the bot's answers. You also collect your own prompts, right, to show the class. And together we can critique the biases, the inconsistent arguments, and factual errors in it. You can demonstrate a student's grasp of the domain knowledge. This is for more advanced students, maybe toward the end of semester.
I think we have a most wonderful experience today. It teaches a lot about, our encounter with the generated AI and what we can do about it, I think, and how in what way we can think more in a more productive way.